What is up, you guys? Teller checking in for UFC Vegas 72, newly headlined by Yadong Song and Ricky Simone. As a lot of you guys know, they were initially supposed to be fighting this past weekend, but with Renato Moicano pulling out of the big fight with Arman Sarukian and that was supposed to be taking place on this card, the UFC wisely throws this as the headliner, salvaging this card, because without this fight, there really wouldn't be a lot to talk about. So we have already broke down this fight, but we're going to go a little bit more extensively into this matchup here. If you guys are looking to check the recap of UFC Vegas 71, which just took place this past weekend, as well as my big thoughts of what should be taking place next in the heavyweight division between Sergey Pavlovich and John Jones, you can check that out. It's uploaded here at the channel. Please like this video, subscribe, support me in any way you guys can. Go follow me on my social media on Instagram and Twitter. It means a lot to me, guys. I won't draw this out. We're going to jump right into the first fight here. And I'll tell you what, on this fight card, we're going to snip off all the fat. We're going to cut to the nitty gritty, the fine details that we need to know when it comes to these fights. And let's make some money. And one further note, I will be uploading another free play video coming your guys' way this week. Obviously, this last week's free play coming your way did not hit, and obviously it was a very, very annoying, obnoxious fight to watch, the fight between Usman and Talfa. That was a frustrating one, but you know, we can complain, we can say this and that. At the end of the day, it didn't cash, so you guys know we're back on the bike and we are looking to cash another big play there. And keep in mind, we have still been profiting overall with those free plays, and I got something coming for you guys this week. You guys watch how we bounce back. All right, guys, thank you all for the support. It means the world to me. Let's go jump into the first fight.
Welcome to the show. This the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.
All right, guys, kicking things off, we have a bantamweight matchup between Hailey Cowan and Jamey-Lyn Horth. Let's cut to the chase. All right, there is barely any film that I could pull up on Jamey-Lyn Horth, but there are some key details that we could talk about in regards to this fight. Okay, Hailey Cowan, you guys know that I have not been that impressed with her overall. You know, obviously dating back to her most notable fight, which was on the Dana White's Contender Series show, where she defeated Claudia late. But that was a fight that could have went either way. It was a very close fight. You know, I like the fact that Hailey dug deep late in that fight, but she definitely showed to have some major holes in her game. We saw her on her back at some point in times in that fight. Wasn't overly impressed with her striking. She's 31 years old. She's a tough cookie, but overall, I really don't know how any of you guys can be too confident or too impressed with what you've seen from her. Now, on the other hand, Jamey-Lyn Horth, she's 5-0 as a pro. We talked about the fact you can't pull those fights up, but do keep in mind that she has an amateur victory over Lupita Garines. And Lupita, we know, is a very talented fighter. We know she has the wrestling credentials as she came into the mixed martial arts side of things. I think that that's a pretty solid victory there. You take a look at her other 5 victories, going out there, getting finishes in all of them. Not the most respectable names, not the most recognizable names. I mean, maybe you could take a look at the Myra Canturia victory that she had over on an LFA card, LFA 120. You know, got the submission there in the 3rd round. But again, I don't have access to any of these fights. You know, I'm going to let you guys know right now, I'm going to take the UFC newcomer in Jamey-Lyn Horth. And I don't say that with an overwhelming confidence based on the fact I haven't seen her on tape, but when you tell me she's going out there finishing all her 5 pro victories, the one latter victory was over a decently respectable opponent. I like the Lupita Garines victory. She's never tasted defeat yet. All of her amateur fights were victories, and you know, from what I've been hearing, she's a tough cookie, and she's a very diligent fighter that's been training hard. She's faced some adversity. She's had some major injuries. She's pushed through it. And on the other hand, like I said, I just have not been that impressed with Hailey Cowan. So I'm taking Jamey-Lyn Horth here. Let's take a look at the betting line where we will see that this fight is essentially a pick-em match here. Jamey-Lyn Horth, you know, on BetMGM was a -110, a little bit movement coming her way. She's a -105 right now. Not a lot of movement. You know, but you know what? I would not be surprised as this fight gets closer and we see a little bit more from Jamey-Lyn Horth. We see her on camera and whatnot. If she's looking good at the weigh-ins, I would not be surprised if she enters the cage as the slight favorite here. But again, this is a dangerous fight, okay? This is a dangerous fight, and you really shouldn't be that confident either way. You might want to stay away from it. For you degenerates that love to have action on every single fight, I think you're better suited taking the newcomer here. Staying put in the bantamweight division, but going over to the men's side of things, we got one of my arch nemesis. You guys know me and Brian Kelleher had a run-in way back in the day, and there's no love lost here. Whatever that means, you hear that saying all the time. There's no love lost. I mean, if anybody wants to go in depth on that, I guess you can kind of infer what that means, but I like to just throw that around. There's no love lost between me and Kelleher. Journey Newsom, 34 years old. This is a fight that makes sense when you really look at what both fighters have been doing as of recently. Not really anything impressive going on between either fighters. One thing I will say, to be honest, is that Brian Kelleher has been fighting some upper echelon type of competition. So even though he's not getting the job done, the loss to Mario Batista and Umar Nurmagomedov, both talented fighters. Before that, defeating lower level fighters and Kevin Kroom and Domingo Pilarte. Then he had the decision loss to Ricky Simón. You can also say the same thing about Journey Newsom. He also has an early decision loss to Ricky Simón. You look at the victories that Brian Kelleher has had throughout his UFC career, a lot of layups. Ray Rodriguez, a fighter that should have never stepped foot inside the UFC octagon. I believe that was a short notice fight. Hunter Azure, whatever. He had the wrestling credentials, but really was never up to par. Maybe the biggest victory that he ever had was an Odie Osborne, who was making his UFC debut in the bantamweight division, I do believe. Now a flyweight fighter, so not really in his natural division there. And, listen, we're not going to be raving about Renan Barão when he was off the steroids, completely on the decline. The Yuri Alcantara fight, if you want to talk about that, whatever. Really not a lot of big time things going on here. But you know what? You can say the same thing for Journey Newsom. Nothing really going on here too much. One thing I do want to say, the Domingo Pilarte fight, he knocked Domingo out. Keep in mind that Domingo Pilarte, in that fight, it got turned to a no contest. It was based off a marijuana failed test for Journey Newsom, which you guys know is completely irrelevant. So that was a nice knockout victory for Journey Newsom there. We know that Journey Newsom has some boxing skills. That's really his bread and butter, but he has some wrestling abilities as well. He's been working on his takedown defense, coming off a tough loss to Sergey Morozov, a very talented fighter. Defeated Fernie Garcia before that. Got knocked out by Randy Costa. Nothing too crazy going on here. And I'm sorry that, the loss that I was referring to against Ricky Simón, who we'll be talking about, that was, I believe, on the amateur side of things. So that was an amateur fight, but he did lose to him and was able to survive in there against a beast like Ricky Simón, even though it was an amateur fight. Look, you take a look at what the numbers they've been putting off in the UFC. Brian Kelleher, a little bit more aggressive, landing almost one significant strike per minute more than Journey Newsom, but also absorbing quite a bit more damage throughout his career. And that could be a problem because Journey Newsom has some decent boxing. Journey Newsom is also going to be having a reach advantage here in this match, which I think that could play dividends as they box it out. If Journey Newsom can keep that distance, he'll have a 1.5 inch reach advantage. And also check this out real quick, because this is 1.5 inch reach here, but if you take a look at Tapology, they have Journey Newsom having a 3.5 reach advantage. So, we got to kind of look into that. I don't know. Maybe it's somewhere in the middle, but do understand that Journey Newsom will have a little bit of a reach advantage there. And look, the Domingo Pilarte fight, Kelleher goes to decision with him. Journey Newsom starches him in the first. Brian Kelleher being finished in his last two fights, and they were by submission, but he did take damage on the feet early. I don't know. Maybe Pilarte can land some significant shots early on. But I would say more so, I think that he just needs to be able to keep his butt and his back off the mat and just needs to outbox Kelleher on the feet. Kelleher will throw his kicks and he'll be aggressive. But if Journey Newsom can keep it there, I think that he's a little bit more of the polished boxer. And you know what? You guys know I'm not a fan of Kelleher, so you know what? I'm going to fade him here. I'm not picking Kelleher. Now, I don't say that with a lot of confidence. Kelleher has a nasty guillotine. It's almost as good as mine. It's almost as nasty as the Telleratine. The Kelleratine, not really on the level of the Telleratine, but it's pretty good. He's pulled off some nasty guillotines before. Some people say that he was spying on me back in the day in my camp trying to learn how I did it. I can't really say one way or another if he actually did do that, so I'm not going to just sit here and call that out. But Kelleher is a minus 165 favorite right now. Journey Newsom's the plus 135 dog. I'll say there's a little bit more value on the plus 135 line. I picked Jordy Newsom here. I don't say that with a lot of confidence. And in fact, I would say that this is a fight that you really stay away from betting personally. I just don't like the track record of either of these fighters, but I sit back on the couch and I pull the popcorn out and I crack open a cold beer and I look to smile as we potentially see Kelleher finish once again and maybe he gets his walking papers. Stephanie Egger will be welcoming Irina Alekseeva, the Russian, to the UFC. She is 4-1, only 5 professional fights. You can pull up some of her tape on YouTube, and she's a tough chick. She's a physically strong fighter, and she has some decent skills. You watch her on tape, and she has some grappling skills, decent power. She's a tough cookie. Stephanie Egger, I've been pleasantly surprised with the production that she's been putting out in the UFC octagon as of recently. We know she's a black belt in judo. We've seen those skills there, but her overall game has been rounding out. Only 11 pro fights. She's 34 years old, obviously getting into the game a little bit later. But I do like the production that she's been putting out. As I said, she just finished the very tough Aline Perez. Before that, a little bit of a controversial loss to Mayra Bueno Silva, but not really. She got caught in a sub, and it was what it was. Mayra Bueno Silva is a very talented fighter, so just chalked it up as an L. Before that, submits Jessica Rose Clark, finishes Shayna Young, has a loss to Tracy Cortez, but we know that Cortez has some very solid wrestling skills, and it was what it was there. And again, Stephanie Egger is learning on the job, and she's becoming a better fighter fight to fight. And I really believe that she's been rounding out to be a pretty solid fighter here at the age of 34 years old. And, her overall martial arts skills are still growing. But as far as her age goes, she's nearing probably the prime of her career here. And within this year, you're going to see the prime version of Stephanie Egger, in my opinion, because once she hits her late 35, 36, even though she'll be learning more in the sport, she'll probably decline physically a little bit. So we're starting to see a pretty good product here for Stephanie Egger. You take a look at her throwing the foot towards your way. For some of you guys that are into that, there you go. And then you got Irina Alekseeva. Again, we were talking about her. You take a look at some of her footage. If the fight goes to the mat, we've seen that she's capable down there. But you know what? I've been liking what I've seen from Stephanie Egger, and I'm going to say that I edge her down in the mat. I think that it's more likely we see her pulling off a submission on the feet. Let's take a look at how these two fighters match up physically. Stephanie Egger with a 2-inch reach advantage. Now, Irina Alekseeva, I want to pull this up on Tapology as well here. Excuse me. She will be 2 inches shorter. So even though she has the 2-inch reach advantage, Irina 2 inches taller. She has a solid frame for the division as well. And, I'm going to cut to the chase. I think that Irina Alekseeva has some potential to come into the UFC and make some noise. I do believe that. She's a tough chick. She's not a fighter that's coming in here undersized like we've seen from some of the opponents coming in there facing off against Stephanie Egger, as we talked about the height advantage for her, which is kind of surprising. And you know what? I want to pull up the betting line here. I am going to be taking Stephanie Egger. I think you have to take her. She's been proving herself in the UFC. She's had more fights in the UFC. And one thing that's very important that we got to talk about here, let me pull this up, is that Stephanie Egger, right, just in her last 5 fights, right, she's fought 5 times, or let's more importantly say she's fought 4 times in the last year and a half, right? Where on the other hand, Irina has fought 1 time in the last year and a half, and that was over in the Bellator cage where she defeated Stephanie Page. So 1 fight compared to 4 fights. Stephanie Egger already fighting inside the octagon. Who do we pick in this fight? Yes, we, on a more serious note, we do pick Stephanie Egger to get the job done based on what we're looking at. But let's take a look at the betting line. All right, you take a look at the betting line here, and you're going to see that Stephanie Egger right now, which we're going to pull this up on Best Fight Odds. Stephanie Egger is a big favorite. She's a minus 300 favorite right now on BetMGM. That line hasn't moved. We take a look at it at Bet Rivers, minus 335 favorite. Not a lot of movement so far. Over on FanDuel, we see her open up as a minus 340. It goes up to a minus 320, back down to a 340, back to a 330. So you see movement all around the way. But one thing is pretty much staying the same, is that Stephanie Egger is a big-time favorite here. I find that to be a little surprising, especially what we've been seeing in women's mixed martial arts. You guys know I I was a little bit of a fish over the last couple of weeks, looking at the bait, biting the hook, and sometimes you on tape you see one fighter looking to be the superior fighter, and you just never know with women's mixed martial arts. Sometimes these fighters just don't show up, and the takedowns can be a problem for these girls, this and that. And I'm not crazy about that line, and I'm gonna say that there's definitely more value on the UFC newcomer from what I've seen from her. She has at the very least shown to be a tough chick and a fighter that can come in and shake things up. So. But I do pick Stephanie Egger to get the job done, but more value on the Russian side of things here. All right. The more value on the Irina Alekseeva betting line. So we got a newly added match of Josh Quinlan versus Trey Waters. A lot of you guys familiar with Trey Waters from Dana White's Contender Series and the LFA. Josh Quinlan was supposed to be facing off with Angelusa. Angelusa, you guys know him from Dana White's Contender Series and also, making his appearance in the UFC. Angelusa, a longtime Sanford MMA, now you call it Kale Cliff FC product. He's a talented striker. I was excited to see that initial matchup, but I'm just about as excited for this matchup as Trey Waters has really proven to be a tough fighter that really brings the fight and is willing to duke it out. And that's the perfect recipe to mix with a guy like Josh Quinlan who does the same thing. Josh Quinlan, a lot of respect going his way. He cashed in a major way for me as I had 2 official plays on him in his last fight as I took him straight up and to get the knockout. Took that knockout prop on him in that fight where he defeated Jason Witt, the wrestler there. The Logan Urban knockout victory was overturned due to a failed drug test, but I like the way that he looked in that UFC debut against Jason Witt. So, looking to be just as good as he ever was, but maybe there's some minor question marks about that failed drug test, which was due to some type of performance-enhancing drug. It wasn't a marijuana failed test like we talked about when we were talking about Journey Newsom. Quinlan has been starching everybody, and don't get it misunderstood. He's not a fighter that's not proven to go late in fights. He has submissions in the 3rd round, knockouts in the 3rd round, knockouts in the 2nd round. He has, in the limited amount of action he's been in, he's gone past the 1st round. So he's not some fighter that's just a 1-round wonder. Obviously sometimes people do have some concerns about fighters like that. I think that he has somewhat proven that, even though he only has seven fights under his belt. We need to see more from him. I know some people that have trained with him that I talked to. Shout out to you guys out there, but nothing but rave reviews about Josh Quinlan. This guy's dynamite in his hands. He's 30 years old. Trey Waters, though, a stud of a fighter as well. And real quick, before we look at the work he's been putting in, he's going to have about a 5-inch reach advantage here. So he's going to have that reach advantage on the feet. We talked about how dangerous he is in the feet. He lost his fight on Dana White's Contender Series. He was submitted by Gabriel Bonfim. We know how nasty the Bonfim brothers are. Gabriel, in my opinion, is even the more promising brother, even though they both are so promising. So not too much shame with that loss there. But he bounces back with a knockout against Jalen Fuller over in LFA. He's been finishing everybody that he's been in there with, basically, except for one fight against Tauver there. So, I really think that this fight has all the makings to be an absolute clash on the feet. Josh Quinlan, we talked about the fact that he'll be at a little bit of a disadvantage in the reach department. He has good footwork. He mixes things up pretty well. And I don't think that will give him too much of a problem. I think that he'll close the distance here. And I kind of foresee these guys going to war a little bit in the pocket. I think that Quinlan will close that distance. And I think that we're going to see some fireworks taking place in this fight. Now, if Trey is smart, I think that he should, use his footwork properly and kind of strike from the outside and try to set things up. Maybe, pump the jab quite a bit, but I'm not really sure if that's how this fight's going to play out. I just have a feeling that Trey is going to get sucked into the war here. If you watch his fights, they're very action-packed, and a lot of them go that route, and I just have a feeling that that's going to happen. And I got to side with my boy Josh Quinlan here. Quinlan also planning to fight on this date initially against a very talented fighter in Angelusa. Probably a little bit more fine-tuned going in this fight. I don't know exactly what Trey was up to and how much training he was getting in leading up to this fight. So that's another question mark there. Both men at very great age as far as their careers go. Both men very young and primed fighters, 30 and 28. These guys have a lot to bring to the table here, and we will take a look at the betting line where you're going to see that Josh Quinlan is the slight favorite here. Real quick, I don't know if you guys can see that's a little bit over to the side, but not all books have opened this line since it's a newly added match. They will slowly start to open out, but we're starting to see that Quinlan is opening around a minus 150 favorite. The comeback on Trey Waters at plus 130, and the line might close a little bit more even as this line goes on. And I think that that's understandable because Trey Waters is a dangerous fighter, brings in that reach and all that. And that one loss that he had, he's not to be thrown to the fire too much because Bonfim's the real deal. So this fight is going to be a barn burner. Someone was probably going to get knocked out. I have a feeling. Maybe you look at the under prop finishes, but I'm going to side with Quinlan here. There's a couple things like we talked about that point towards Quinlan's way, and I think you want Quinlan more around a minus 135 maybe or better. Maybe that's the case. Minus 150 if you're really digging him there. I'm not going to hold it against you there, but I think you see that line close a little bit. Maybe you wait and get a better line than minus 150. We got a fun flyweight match here. Cody Durden taking on Charles Johnson. Both fighters somewhat of polarizing personalities, I guess you could say. A lot of people hating on Cody Durden. He's a fighter that has been a little bit outspoken on the mic after he's had some victories. I like the energy he brings. You guys know I like the more drama, the better. Charles Johnson, another fighter that's very outspoken. He's a fun fighter. Coming off a very disappointing loss. A lot of people thought that he could have took that fight against Ode Osborne. It was a very close one. I thought that he probably edged that fight. It could have went either way, though. And you know what? He took that fight on short notice, so you have to understand that first and foremost. If he had a full camp for that fight, I think you have to edge Charles Johnson getting the job done there for sure, based on the fact that he slowed down. There was no question. His cardio had an impact on that fight. He was breathing heavy. I don't necessarily expect that to be the case in this fight, as he is coming off that loss, and I'm sure he went right back to the gym and has been training nonstop, and he knew further in advance that he was going to be stepping down in the octagon here. Charles Johnson, very quick on the feet. He mixes things up well, puts a great output out on the feet. And I think that he is a threat to Durden there. I think that Durden needs to be sharp with his defense. We have seen Durden hurt on the feet. And you take a look statistically, Charles Johnson landing 4.46 strikes per minute, while Durden landing 3.13 strikes per minute. But do understand that Durden has showcased to have a little bit of power in his hands. You take a look at what these guys have been doing as of recently. Durden coming off a decision win against Carlos Mota, a fighter that some people do respect coming up. He had the knockout over JP Bays, but JP Bays has been knocked out by quite a few amount of people as of recently. And, of course, Cheyenne Bays really kicking that things off, really diminished the chin. And then ever since then, he's just been constantly getting knocked out. Don't underestimate that Durden does have some power in the hands, and I think that there's potential to see that showcase down the line. He has good grappling, good wrestling. He had the loss to Muhammad Mokaev. He was submitted, whereas Charles Johnson was able to go the distance and lose there. And we know that Muhammad Mokaev is a very hyped and a very promising fighter. He had the victory over Ayori Quinlan. That was the fight where he really was outspoken on the mic, and I think it was a smart move. People started to recognize what he's about there. Had the draw with Chris Gutierrez. That says something there, getting that draw against Chris Gutierrez. And I think that the book isn't out on Durden. We need to see more from him. I think this is a great fight for him to really put himself out there. If he can get a big victory over Charles Johnson, I think that will really start to recognize him a little bit more so in the division. Same could be said, though. Charles Johnson goes out here, gets a finish, or does something very explosive. We've seen Durden finish. If he can go out there and do that, I think that he starts to get a lot of hype and is really respected in the division as well. This is a huge fight for both men, in my opinion here. Before that Osborne loss, he had a great victory over Jimmy Flick, as Jimmy Flick made his return back to the cage, went out there, was hurting him down on the mat, ground and pounding him, just doing all types of things. Had the victory over Zalgas and Magula before that. The loss to Muhammad Mokaev in his UFC debut, again, coming off coming in his debut there. So that was a big fight for him. And then you talk about the work he was putting over in LFA, also has a victory over Carlos Mota. He was able to get a finish there in the 5th round on a common opponent. So how do I see this fight taking place? I just think that Charles Johnson will be a little bit more tuned up with his cardio. I think he'll be able to go a little bit more in this fight, and I think that he's going to outland on Durden a little bit. He'll outland him a little bit more so the volume will be there if it goes to the judges' scorecards. The judges probably aren't going to be fans of Cody Durden. I think they'll lean more towards a guy like Charles Johnson, so you keep an eye on that. I don't know, depending on who's judging the fight. Cody Durden, though, just keep in mind, he's a well-rounded and polished fighter that's been putting in work over at American Top Team, and there's a lot of dangerous fighters that are training at that gym right now that he's training with at his respected weight, and he's really been getting in some great work. So I'm just warning you guys, don't sleep on Cody Durden, because love him or hate him, this is a fighter that's gonna give some fighters some problems when he steps in there with him, and it's not out of the realm that he goes in here and gives Charles Johnson a problem. I'm just letting you guys know that. But I will say that Charles Johnson's a little bit too quick, mixes things up a little bit better, and outlands Cody Durden here. And there's potential that he finishes this fight as well. So I will take Charles Johnson, but by no means is that a given. I'll let you guys know that right now. Let's go take a look at the betting line. And you'll see that right now Charles Johnson's a -165 favorite on Bovada.lv, which you guys know if you're looking to sign up for a new sportsbook, reach out to me, give you that referral link, you get an added bonus to your account, and I'm giving you this entire card for free as far as my official plays go. -165 line, the bounce back on Cody Durden at +135. I think that this line is right on the head. That's where this line should be. If anything, maybe Johnson can come down to a -160, -155, but you definitely have to favor Charles Johnson, and just understand that Cody Durden's dangerous, and if you're looking to take him, if you're feeling him in there, that at least you're getting some value maybe on that dog line, and he is a well-rounded fighter, has some grappling skills. We'll see if he could potentially sneak in some takedowns and look to exhaust Charles Johnson like Buday did, but again, understanding that Charles Johnson took that fight on short notice. But we'll see if maybe Durden can implement similar tactics, because Durden has a good gas tank. And if he can make this a fight where we have a high volume from the very get-go, maybe we see Charles Johnson still gas out even with the full camp going into this fight. Just saying, but give me Charles Johnson to get the job done here. In the lightweight division, we have the Israeli Natan Levy taking on Pete Rodriguez, who's coming off a big-time victory against a very low-level opponent. But, there was a lot of people that were very happy to see Pete Rodriguez shut up Mike Jackson the way that he did. Specifically me, I could think of Jake Shields, and I'm sure a couple of you guys that are listening were happy to see that, because I absolutely can't stand this leech of a man in Mike Jackson, and it was so great to just see him get starched the way that he was. Big-time knockout, but again, Mike Jackson is not really a UFC caliber fighter. He was due a fight. The UFC kind of owed him a fight. He went out there, he beat CM Punk, beat him up a long time ago, and was just kind of strung along with the UFC looking for fights, and I think they kind of owed him that fight. That was the end of that. And before that, he takes a knockout loss to Jack Della Maddalena. We know that Jack is one of the most dangerous guys in the division right now, so we understand that. And of course, that fight taking place, excuse me if I'm wrong here, but that fight taking place in the welterweight division. So Pete coming down in weight, I do believe. Excuse me here. Let's check that real quick. So that's good to know, because Pete Rodriguez was looking a little bit too thick in that fight, and his natural weight, it should be in the lightweight division. So yes, that was taking place in the welterweight division. He's now fighting in the lightweight division, where he should be. And as you see the way he was looking there, he should be more chiseled going in this fight. He has some solid boxing skills. He has some solid striking. Again, we saw what he did to Mike Jackson. Same could be said for Natan Levy. Natan Levy throws some good kicks out there. He's a polished striker. He's a traditional martial artist, and he works it in his own way well into the cage. His grappling's been coming along. That's the main thing you have to understand. He's been sharpening his grappling. Maybe he has an advantage when it comes to the grappling here. When you look at Pete Rodriguez here landing 10.37 strikes per minute, you have to understand that it's a little skewed, right? It's based off 2 fights, and both those fights ending very early and just going to war immediately. So take that with a grain of salt. Natan Levy, 4.01 strikes. That's a solid number there. And he's been in the UFC here fighting for some time now. Comes in phenomenal shape. Take a look at the grappling. Natan Levy landing or takedown average at 5.37 per 15 minutes. That's a pretty good number there. 57% takedown accuracy. I think that he should look to mix things up here. I think that would be a very smart route for him, and he's an intelligent fighter, and I think that he will look to do that. As long as he mixes things up, I think he can keep Pete Rodriguez a little bit unbalanced, and Even again, you see 100% takedown defense, but he really hasn't been tested that much in Pete Rodriguez. So we'll see if Natan Levy can kind of shake things up as this fight unravels a little bit more. So if it does, you never know though, because Pete Rodriguez will bring the fight from the get-go, and he'll be looking to starch Levy. But so this is a fun fight here. I gotta edge Natan Levy based on the fact that he has more UFC experience, more UFC minutes in the cage. He has 9 pro fights compared to Pete Rodriguez's 6. Not much of a difference there, but Natan Levy having more time in the octagon. I think that he has a little bit of a higher fight IQ and he's a little bit more well-rounded. But the book is not out on Pete Rodriguez at all. We just don't know exactly what he is about. You know, he came into the UFC and it was kind of a surprising debut, right? I believe he was only 4-0 at the time, starched all 4 of those fighters, and I'm excited to see what he's about down the line. But I gotta edge Natan Levy right now. That's just the way I'm feeling. If you take a look at everything, Natan Levy's a -275. Pete Rodriguez is a +220. You know, it might be a little bit more dangerous than some of you guys think. I'm not really sure if I want to touch a -275 line on Natan Levy. Don't be surprised if Pete Rodriguez continues to sharpen up and proves to be a dangerous fighter. More value on the +220. Let's see how that fight takes place. Now, this one's going to be a fun one. I'll let you guys know right now. Don't miss this fight. You guys know Julian Erosa always brings it. He's a very well-rounded and dangerous fighter, and the same can be said about the UFC newcomer Fernando Padilla. Fernando putting in work already over at LFA and King of the Cage. You know, not the most decorated resume coming into the UFC. 14-4. He's taken some losses, but he's a fighter that has shown to be very well-rounded, very dangerous. He's willing to bring the fight, and he's a fighter that can instantly become a fan favorite with his style. And I think that this just has all the makings to be a clash. Both very long and rangy fighters for the featherweight division, as Fernando will actually be the slightly taller fighter and will actually have a 1.5-inch reach advantage. You don't typically say that against a guy like Julian Erosa. Now, Julian Erosa, we know that he's a fighter that continues to come in as an underdog and a lot of times has shook things up. You know, he was just knocked out against Bruce Leroy, Alex Caceres. Alex Caceres has been on fire. But before that, victories over Steven Peterson, Hakeem Dawodu. Now, that was a big one. You know, submitting Charles Jourdain. Did get knocked out against the Sting, Sang-Woo Choi. But before that, a knockout over Nate Landwehr. Landwehr has been on fire. Submission victory over Sean Woodson. And then, of course, you talk about outside the UFC, a submission over AJ Bryant. He did have a brief stint outside the UFC. He's been a little bit back and forth, you know, as he did have a couple of losses there in a row, but against good level of opponents, Julio Arce, Grant Dawson, Devontae Smith. How about the knockout victory on Dana White's Contender Series against Jamal Emmers, really stringing off those victories, starting things off with those victories as being a big underdog. Okay, so listen, whenever you're seeing Julian Erosa stepping in the cage, you just know that he's always live. Juicy J, I mean, I remember him from the Ultimate Fighter show. Good striking skills, very well-rounded. As I said, Fernando Padilla is very similar in that sense that he's dangerous. He's looking to sub off his back. He's wild down on the mat. He's wild with his striking. I just think that this is going to be a very fun fight. Now, the reason why I'm going to be siding Julian Erosa is just the UFC experience that he has. I think that he obviously has an edge there. And when you talk about Fernando making his debut, I just think that he has his back up against the wall a little bit if Julian Erosa looks to slow things down and use that advantage there. Now, if this just becomes a wildfire fight, I think that Fernando will very much be in this fight and anything can happen. But I do like the experience of Julian Erosa here, Juicy J. And look at Julian cheesing there. And, you know, happy Valentine's Day, my love. You can see why he's cheesing there, man. He's doing good. Looks like he's taking care of her. Got the big old rock on her hand. And I think Julian most likely will be smiling similarly to that. And when this fight finishes off, just, again, based on the experience that he's had, he's been in there with a lot more polished opponents, more respectable opponents. Fernando has a victory over Derek Minner, where he subbed him when the fight went down to the mat. And as I was rewatching that fight, I hate to say it. Listen, I interviewed Derek Minner. I got nothing but love and respect for those guys. But the way that he got submitted in that fight, man, and as you're watching, especially what you know now, I was really wondering if Derek Minner actually allowed him to sub him in that fight. I don't even know if Fernando really pulled off that sub. Did Minner have some action on Fernando? I mean, you can get action over on the LFA side of things. I believe that fight took place in LFA, and there's books that take action on those fights. And did he just, you know, take that take that loss to put some money in his pocket? That's a legitimate question. You guys think I'm crazy here, or some of you might, but first round submission too. When Minner likes to fade himself, he always goes for that first round loss there, because I guess that's where just make it quick, right? You don't want to play around too much, right? You don't want to take a third round prop sub in case something else happens, some type of cut. You make it quick, right? You think about that, man. So I don't really know about that. And he's taken some losses. He went to a decision with Spike Carlo. That's respectable as well, over at CXF. But I will be siding with Julian Erosa based on a lot of what we just talked about, the experience. Julian Erosa is a -165. Padilla is dangerous. He's a fun fighter. I'm excited to see him make his debut. He's a +136 underdog. I think that this line's respectable. I feel more comfortable taking Erosa here just with that experience. Even at a -165 line, I'll kind of edge that way. It's going to be an electrifying fight. Martin Buday taking on Jake Collier. Of course, Jake Collier now really settling in as a heavyweight fighter. It's still crazy to think when he was fighting in the welterweight division. I always got to mention it. Jake Collier, 34 years old. We've seen that his striking is up to par, right? He has some good boxing skills. He's a decently well-rounded fighter. I definitely have to mention the loss that he just recently took against Chris Barnett. I mean, that was a really ugly loss there, where Chris Barnett eventually fell on top of him and finished him up. And it was a really bad look to see Collier just flat on his stomach, looked like a turtle flipped out over on his shell, and just he wasn't going anywhere. And if you were to tell me that there's not a possibility that the same thing happens at some time in this fight, I would say you're wrong, even though I understand that Buday has not been a fighter that has really used any type of grappling since fighting under the UFC banner. No takedowns attempted, nothing going on there. But I think that his footwork will be a little bit sharper. I think his cardio will be a little bit better. And I wouldn't be shocked if somehow he ends up on top. And if he gets on top, I mean, we've seen that the fight is pretty much over. Now, we're going to get to the betting line here in a second. What you're going to see is very close. And I think I understand why some people have this fight closer than what maybe I think it should be. Jake Collier landing 5.75 strikes per minute. So he's been putting more volume on the feet compared to what Buday has. Buday at 4.59. People may think that Collier is a little bit more polished there, might have a little bit of an edge in the boxing department. Collier, basically, they're both absorbing the same amount per minute. Let's just be honest there. We're not going to go into the numbers. Basically, defensively, they're very similar. Buday just was in a very close fight against Marcus Bresky. Some people thought that Bresky should have took that fight, but I think you could say that at the very end of the day, that Buday did show that he's a decently well-rounded fighter, and he brings some skills to the table. He's 11-1, hasn't tasted defeat in quite a bit, right? You take a look, his last loss was way back in 2017, and that was against Juan Espino, a very talented fighter, the Spaniard wrestler. So other than that, just handling business, and 31 years old, strolling into the prime of his career. I think his confidence is at an all-time high. I don't know where Jake Collier is mentally after having Chris Barnett flopped on top of him, finishing him there. And I am going to be taking Martin Buday to get the job done here. Collier having about a 1-inch reach advantage. Buday 1 inch taller. I don't think there's really too much going on here. These guys push the limits on the scale at the heavyweight division. They're two big boys. And I just feel more comfortable taking Martin Buday here, if you ask me. You take a look at Jake Collier's losses. He's been finished via KO, TKO 4 times in his career. Buday with 7 of his 11 wins coming by KO, TKO. I think there's some potential. Like I said, he can get a stoppage here if Collier starts breathing heavy. I'm not going to make it seem like this is a walk in the park, but Collier, 34 years old, a fighter that has proven to not take care of his body. Obviously, the way he ballooned up to the heavyweight division. I know he brings some skills to the table, but I just don't feel confident taking a guy like Collier. Give me Martin Buday, and you'll see on Bovada.lv that Buday is the minuscule underdog here. Pretty much a pick-em, -107, but people favoring Collier very, very, very minusculely, as I said, if that's a word, minusculely, at a -110 favorite. Just 3 little points of a difference. Like I said, it's a pick-em fight, so pick your poison. I'll feel more comfortable taking Martin Buday. Again, he doesn't look the most physically fit, but when you actually see the way he moves and you understand how his body is, I think that's just the way his body is, the way he looks. Whereas when you know how Jake Collier used to look and you know how he looks now, you know that he wasn't really just always a naturally big guy like that. I don't know. I won't go too much into that. Give me Buday, and obviously I think there's more value on a pick-em line like that. We got a heavyweight showdown here between Waldo Cortes-Acosta, the Dominican, taking on the Brazilian Marcos Rogerio de Lima. He's been around the block for some time now. I would love to see more fighters coming from that part of the world where Waldo's from, the Dominicans, the Puerto Ricans, all there in the Caribbean. I would love to see more fighters coming from that side of the world. We know Waldo, of course, being an ex-baseball player. You'd be surprised at some of the torque that some of those baseball players have with that overhand right. We know Waldo has some boxing experience as well, but I bet you Waldo can throw a ball far. I like his boxing. It's pretty good. His striking's coming around. He hasn't been in the sport of MMA nearly as long as Marcos Rogerio de Lima, that's for sure. But I just wanted to throw that out there as this sport begins to evolve and grow. I think that we'll see a lot more talented fighters coming from that side of the world, and it would be a good thing to see, right? We want to see the sport continue to grow and evolve. Waldo Cortes-Acosta bursting on the scene on Dana White's Contender Series. I guess you could say bursting on the scene, gets a victory, gets the contract. He has now won 2 fights in the UFC, right? Yep, against Chase Sherman and Jared Vanderaa. Both decision victories, both not overwhelming performances realistically, if you want to be honest. And on the other hand, Marcos Rogerio de Lima, he has had a lot of hit or miss type performances inside the octagon. And I really want to talk about his resume here for a second because there's some important facts that you guys have to understand. The submission victory over Andrei Arlovsky. I know Arlovsky has been hanging around for some time, but he is up there in age, and eventually that train had to stop. We know that those men have trained together, I believe, at American Top Team, and they had to face each other. It was what it was. Blagoy Ivanov takes a decision victory over Rogerio there. Victories over Ben Rothwell and Maurice Green. Now, listen, real quick. Let's just cut to the chase here before I mention the fact that he was submitted by Alexander Romanov in the first round due to a forearm choke, which really just looks horrendous right now when you understand how much of a front runner Romanov is. But guess who's another front runner? Marcos Rogerio de Lima. Both those fighters front runners. If they weren't going to get the job in the first round, it would have been funny to see how that fight would have looked in the second and third rounds because their cardios are lacking and their heart kind of lacks as the fight goes on. If you want to cut to the chase, the knockout over the very undersized Ben Saucely. The common theme that you're going to notice is a lot of the victories for Marcos Rogerio de Lima are very early on in his fights, right? Dating back to the Clint Hester victory, which was a very undersized Clint Hester, the Jeremy Kimball. These are all first-round victories. He had a decision victory over Adam Wozurek. Don't really care about that. First round over Ben Saucely. Now, the Maurice Green went to a decision, but understand that all he did was solidify takedowns from the very beginning of every round and just lay on top of him, similarly to what Usman just did against Tafa, whereas Maurice Green had just no answer and just laid on his back, and Rogerio just didn't have to do anything in that fight. We didn't have to see him dig deep, because when he digs deep, a lot of times he fades, okay? So what I want to bring to your attention is if he doesn't get an early finish in this fight, you cannot trust him to look good in the second and third rounds, and there's a good chance that he will fade or he'll just start to wilt and just lose the decision late on in his fights. I really do feel that's just what it is. He's 37 years old. The cardio is lacking, like we said. I believe he has some experience in the light heavyweight division. He's ballooned up to the heavyweight division. He carries some serious power. He's a well-rounded fighter, but there's question marks on his heart and on his cardio. Okay, Waldo Cortes-Acosta, we talked about the fact that his 2 UFC fights so far haven't been that impressive, but he's shown that he's working on his kickboxing. He's decently polished there, and if he could hang around and push this fight to the later rounds, I think that there's a good chance that he takes rounds 2 and 3 and just outstrikes Rogerio Marcos there, and I could see that's how the fight goes. He'll have to weather the storm early on because Rogerio does carry some serious power. But when I see him doing these squats and I see just how massive he is, it doesn't really intimidate me because I know that in the later rounds, he just is not the most dangerous fighter, right? He's dangerous early on. And I don't know. I hope this fight, for Waldo's sake, I hope it goes to the second and third rounds. And I really believe that he will have a good chance to get his hand raised. So I guess you guys know where I'm kind of going with my pick here. I'm going to be taking the underdog and Waldo Cortes-Acosta. 31 years old, a little bit more of a primed fighter, has a 3-inch reach advantage to use those boxing skills in the feet. He has some pro boxing experience, just needs to be careful not to be landed on in a big way early on in this fight because Marcos is dangerous. He carries some serious power, but I don't foresee Marcos sneaking in takedowns like he did against Maurice Green, laying on top of him and just smothering him to a decision. I think that Waldo has good footwork, and understand that Waldo Cortes-Acosta really has just been getting his rhythm going in mixed martial arts around 2018, 2019, whereas Marcos has been around the game for a longer period of time, 37 years old, and you could see maybe that decline coming more so where Waldo has to be on the upcline. The upcline, is that a word? The upcline, the decline? He's on the up and up, and you would think that he looks better fight to fight. He's getting more confidence. He's still undefeated. Give me the underdog, Waldo Cortes-Acosta here. Why not? Waldo Cortes-Acosta at plus 129 underdog. The favorite, Marcos Rogerio de Lima at minus 152. I'll say there's more value on Waldo Cortes-Acosta. I know he hasn't been looking overwhelming in his last 2 fights, but he's been getting his hand raised, and let's see if he uses those leg kicks, pushes this fight to the 2nd and 3rd round, and wins the decision there. Maybe even fades de Lima so bad there in the later rounds, maybe he could pick him apart and get a stoppage. In the middleweight division, we got Cody Brundage taking on Rodolfo Vieira. 2 fighters with grappling backgrounds. Of course, Cody Brundage with the wrestling background. Rodolfo Vieira with the very decorated Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu background. Known as the black belt killer. Vieira is very dangerous down on the mat, and he comes in with some serious muscles and power and strength behind him. He's been a very intriguing fighter since coming over to the UFC. Some ups and downs so far throughout his career. I like this fight here. Cody Brundage, 28 years old, a little bit of the younger fighter. Definitely more and more room for growth from him. You talk about the ups and downs from Vieira. You could definitely say the same thing for Brundage. Coming off a knockout loss against Michal Oliasejczak. Then before that, he had a knockout victory over Trey Gore. You guys know that Trey Gore's management team reached out to me after that fight and noted that Trey Gore had a horrible weight cut and should have never stepped foot in the octagon for that fight. He almost went to the hospital, and you saw how his lights were shut off so easily. Before that, he submits Dalcha Lengambula. We know that Dalcha has some question marks about his cardio and his will in the cage at times. And, he was submitted in the 1st round there. Before that, the loss to Nicholas Maximov, that's a very questionable loss. And I also want to say the knockout he had against William Knight, that was a very questionable loss as well, especially when you see the way William Knight's career went. Brundage getting on top of William Knight early, the way he let William Knight just baseball grip his wrist, throw him over his head, and then get on top of him and get the knockout. It was kind of a strange look, but do understand that fight took place, 3 years ago now. He was 25 years old, so he's learning, he's growing. But you know what? Rodolfo Vieira, you talk about learning and growing. Rodolfo Vieira, we talked about how he mastered the sport of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I mean, what a competitor he was over there. Only 10 fights now in mixed martial arts, and I think that he's really starting to get his groove. And I say that even though he's coming off that loss against Chris Curtis, I thought that performance actually was a good performance by him. He's showing growth with his cardio, most importantly, because remember, he really gassed out against Anthony Hernandez. That's why he was subbed in that fight. And, he's learning how to pace himself, man. And that's what I think you could say. In his, his UFC debut was against Oscar Pichota. I got the submission in the 2nd round. He had a victory over Saparberg Safarov. He disappeared from the sport, submitted in the 1st round there. And then again, Anthony Hernandez submits him, bounces back with the submission victory over Dustin Stoltzfus. And I like the way that he looked in that fight. You could saw that he's pacing himself more so. He's working on his striking as well. His boxing skills sharpening up. He was landing some shots in that fight. And then again, in the Chris Curtis fight, he actually had a decent amount of success in the feet, way more than you would have thought. I had an official play in Chris Curtis. We cashed there. But that fight was a little bit more of a barn burner than I thought that it would have. And it really showed to me that Rodolfo's been working on his craft. And when you talk about a guy that went so far in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you understand that he knows what it takes to sharpen up his skills and what it takes as far as work ethic and what it takes to put in to be great in the sport of MMA. And that's why you see him starting to really get some success. And you see he's got the moves here. He's shaking the hips. There's a very good chance you could see him doing that in the octagon this Saturday when he gets the victory over Cody Brundage, because he's going to be my pick here. I like what I've seen from him. If Cody Brundage looks to use his wrestling, and if this fight goes down to the mat, I don't think his wrestling will be up to the task of course, these guys have overall skills, right? Brundage has jiu-jitsu as well, and Vieira has wrestling, but you mix that recipe together. I like the jiu-jitsu of Vieira over the wrestling of Brundage. I think he'll be in trouble down on the mat. I think you could definitely say that. On the feet, I think that Vieira has shown that he could hold his own, but hopefully things get mixed up. I would love to see these guys down on the mat. It's always a pleasure to see Vieira there. We do note that Brundage has been putting in some serious work with a lot of talented fighters over on the west coast of the USA. You see Anthony Smith there, Zach Cummings. Who else do we got here? What's his name over here? The Hayek kid, the Hayek King, Dustin Jacoby, who's coming off a tough loss. He's been putting in work with a lot of talented guys. We've known that for some time. But so has Rodolfo Vieira. And you know what? Like I said, I'm taking Rodolfo Vieira here. I liked what I've seen from him. Even though he's 33 years old, he is not near the prime of his mixed martial arts career. You're going to see the prime of Vieira, in my opinion, when he's 35 and a half, 36 years old. You're really going to see him figure this sport out, and he won't have a very long time to go when he figures it out, but around that time, he'll be a major threat to a lot of guys in the division. You'll start to see him decline slowly after that, but in the meantime, you're going to see him wreaking some havoc in these fights, and his cardio has been worked on. Give me Rodolfo Vieira here. And real quick, we could take a look at what they've been doing so far in the cage. Rodolfo Vieira, more active on the feet, landing over one more strike per minute there. Absorbing a lot more, though, but understand that he did gas out in that Hernandez fight, took a lot of damage there. On the grappling side of things, Vieira with the 100% takedown defense. If Brundage looks to push the pace with the grappling, 68% for Brundage as well. He has that wrestling. So both these guys pretty good there. And I'm excited to see how this fight takes place. I like this fight. Give me Rodolfo Vieira. Right now, Rodolfo Vieira is going to be a big-time favorite. He's a minus 265 favorite. So a lot of people seeing what I'm seeing as well. They've been seeing the growth in his game. He's a big-time favorite. And not crazy about that line. I think you would want that line under the minus 200 range, if you ask me. If Brundage can maybe look to exploit him in some way, somehow, similarly to what we've seen early on in his UFC career, like Anthony Hernandez did. Brundage has some power. We saw him knock out Trey. Maybe more value in the Brundage line, but I like Vieira here. See what you could do with that line. Maybe you get the under. Maybe you get a sub prop, something like that, a finish prop on Vieira. But I expect Vieira to look sharp here. We got a co-main event matchup of Caio Borralho taking on Michal Oliasechek. This is a fun fight here. Both fighters 30 and under, right? So these fighters still have a lot more to give to the game. They've shown to be very promising fighters. This is a big matchup for both of them. The winner of this fight is really going to be getting some momentum behind them. Michal Oliasechek, a fighter that we've seen fight in the light heavyweight division for some time. He came down to the middleweight division as of recently. He's had some success. We were talking about Cody Brundage just recently. Michal finishing him in his last fight. 28 years old. I like his frame for this middleweight division, a 74-inch reach. Caio Borralho with the 75-inch reach. He'll have a 1-inch reach advantage. We know Caio has some long arms for the division. Caio is a very polished fighter. He's a very disciplined fighter. He has good grappling, good wrestling, good jiu-jitsu, good striking. He's a very well-rounded threat. Michal Oliasechek has some very sharp boxing skills. The fact that he's a southpaw, the way he mixes things up, working the body, throwing those uppercuts, it's really given a lot of his opponents problems. Caio also a southpaw too. He's very tricky, very rangy on the feet. So understand, southpaw versus southpaw, these guys are going to be a little out of rhythm possibly on the feet, just to kick things off as they feel each other out. That southpaw versus southpaw stance for both of them. You know what? I'm going to say that Michal will have the edge on the feet, especially if this fight really starts to heat up. If these guys start to trade, I think that Michal's boxing skills, the way he works the body, the way he's so comfortable there, the volume he puts out, I edge him in the striking department. But the thing is that Caio is very good at mixing things up, and he has very underrated wrestling. I could easily see him sneaking in some takedowns, getting on top, controlling Michal down on the mat. I don't know if he necessarily pulls off the finish, but he's just a little bit more of the well-rounded fighter from what we've seen from him recently. Victories over Makhmud Meradov, Arman Petrosyan, the victory over Gachi, Omar Gachiov. The book's not out on Gachi yet. He's on a 2-fight losing skid, but I think he still has some room for growth, and I think that he'll show to be a decent fighter. Time will tell. And then dating back to his victory on Dana White's Contender Series, in fact, 2 of them against Aaron Jeffrey and Jesse Murray. Now, the Aaron Jeffrey victory, although not the most exciting fight, that one proving to be the bigger fight, as Aaron Jeffrey's been wreaking havoc over in Bellator and whatnot. So he really has shown to be a very good fighter. He trains with some of the big names in the game. And you want to talk about his last loss. It was back in 2015 against Caio Carvalho. Caio Carvalho. How you like that? So listen, Caio, one of the more up-and-coming fighters right now, fighting out of representing Brazil, and I think that he's a very promising fighter. I am going to have to edge Caio here. I think that Caio just shows to be the more well-rounded fighter. The thing is that Michal has had a lot of success, or he's had success since dropping down in the middleweight division. Not a lot, because he's only had, 2 fights in the middleweight division? That's right. Dating back to his loss against Dustin Jacoby, that was a fight that was very, very close, if you remember. Dustin Jacoby saying he had some type of injury going into that fight. That's why he didn't throw kicks. But at the end of the day, Michal looking very good in that fight. Before that, victories over Shamil Gamatov, victory over Modestas Bukaskis, losses to Jimmy Crute and OSP, submitted by OSP. That's something you want to look into, right? OSP was on the decline around that time, still was able to submit him. Maybe Caio gets on top and is able to pull off some type of Kimura, some type of rear naked choke, something like that. If Michal gets a little bit reckless trying to get back up to his feet, I will take Caio Borralho to get the job done here. I hope that Michal is able to keep this fight standing for a good amount of time, and I hope we see these guys trade and we get to see the boxing skills from Oliasechak, because it really is a treat to watch. He's a fun fighter on the feet, and I would love to see him work the body. But overall, I do take Caio here, the more well-rounded fighter, who is a minus 300 favorite right now. We'll take a look at Bovada.lv, a minus 310. He's a big-time favorite. I don't know if that's a line that I'm crazy about. If Michal can show up and use the boxing skills that he has, he can keep this fight close. But again, we all got to pick Caio. That's why he's a big favorite. He's the pick. Hey, you guys, real quick, if you're looking to sign up for a new sports book, you guys know I recommend Bovada.lv. And if you guys are looking to sign up, please do reach out to me so I can give you my referral link. You sign up through my referral link, you get an added bonus to your account, and I'm sending you guys a bunch of free plays. I'm helping you guys maneuver through the website. Any questions you have, it means a lot to me. It'll help me out as well. You guys know, obviously, I get a referral from the website, so I make a little bit of money there. And obviously, I want to make it worth your guys' while. So anything I could do there means a lot. I promise you guys, this is the sports book you want to be using. I use them. They're great to me. The payouts, the deposits, all that are very easy. There's multiple options. Reach out to me if you have any questions. I got my email scrolling below, my Instagram, Twitter, all that. You could DM me. Any questions you have, reach out to me. This is a good card to jump on because I see some great spots on this card to make some money. So here we go to the main event. As we stated, we just broke down this fight for last week's card, so I won't go too long on this prediction. But remember what we compared this fight to. We said that this fight is very similar, in my opinion, to the matchup that we just saw with Petr Yan and Merab Dvalishvili, where Merab was closing the distance using his grappling. Song Yadong, a very quick twitch fighter. We talked about how Corey Sandhagen talked about that in the Joe Rogan experience, how he was the quickest fighter he's ever faced off with. We know he's very technically sound. He's well-rounded. But I do believe if Ricky Simón closes the distance, pushes the pace in him, continues to shoot like he does, because he'll just continuously shoot takedown after takedown, that will pay major dividends for Ricky there, because he does not want to play that game from the outside of who is the more crisp and quicker striker, because Yadong Song is a problem there. He's very fast. He's very dangerous in all aspects on the feet. He uses his kicks very well. His boxing's good. And it's just the route that Ricky has to go. And that's not even to say that Yadong Song has a major deficiency in his cardio or anything. But when we've seen the pace pushed on him a little bit more so, and we've seen him kind of get a little bit more involved in some of those clinch battle type of fights, we've seen him kind of have some trouble, right? Against Chito Vera. A lot of people thought Chito Vera should have won that fight. That was a fight where you saw a lot of clinching going on. You don't want to play that game from the outside. Even though Ricky Simón has a 2-inch reach, he does not want to play that game. Let's not forget when Uriah Faber dropped him with the overhand right and eventually submitted him, I do believe. He does not want to play that game. The route to success here for Ricky, without a doubt, in my opinion, is just a very heavy grappling paced attack. Again, I'm going to bring it up again. The Merab fight against Petr Yan, the same type of tactics should be done here. And the thing that you got to like if you're siding with Ricky is that he has shown time and time again that that's the type of fighter that he is. He loves to use his wrestling and loves to smother his opponents. You think about the submission victory that he just pulled off against Jack Shore, a fighter that also is a polished grappler. He knocked out Rafael Assunção, pushed the pace on Brian Kelleher, pushed the pace on Perillo, submitted him in the second round there. You want to talk about push the pace. That was a fun fight against Ray Borg. Ray Borg retiring from the sport of MMA. Shout out to Ray Borg there. Ran into a little bit of trouble with Uriah Faber and Rob Font. These fights we're talking about were back in 2019. That was 4 years ago. Ricky Simón now, he was 26 back then. I really feel that he has grown into a solid fighter right now. I think he really knows what he's doing. He's 20-3 as a pro, has some solid experience behind him. And, Yadong Song, I can say a lot of good things about him. I think he's very live to show up here and potentially steal the show in this fight. Also, having a guy like Uriah Faber in his corner for some time now. Uriah Faber also having that victory against Ricky Simón. So being familiar with Ricky, maybe that will help him out as well. I don't want to overlook Yadong Song here real quick. Again, I will mention he's only 25 years old as well, so you're only going to see a better version from him. There's no question about that. And if we want to talk about what Yadong Song has been doing, that loss against Corey Sandhagen, that fight was stopped due to a cut. The fight was pretty close. If you ask me, Corey was kind of in control of that fight, but the fight was pretty close. Before that, he knocks out Marlon Moraes, who's been getting knocked out by everybody. Knocked out Julio Arce, the victory over Casey Kenny. Did have a loss to Kyler Phillips. Should have lost to Marlon Vera, but these are respectable names. And understand how young he is as we're talking about these fights, how young he was and how young he still is. But again, I will edge Ricky Simón with the wrestling ability that he has. I think that he digs deep and a very grueling type of fight, and the wrestling pays dividends here. Let's take a look at the betting line on Bovada.lv. A very closely tagged fight here, as Ricky Simón's at -120. Yadong Song is at even odds. This is a very, very closely capped fight. I will say I like Ricky Simón at the -120 line, but I wouldn't be shocked if Yadong Song shows up here and is up to par with his takedown defense and can get some space and really operate from the outside and land some big shots. Again, we talked about Uriah Faber landing that big shot. Don't be surprised if he lands a big shot. Yadong Song is very diverse with his attacks. Maybe he can land a head kick, an overhand right. He could do a little bit of it all. But I will edge Ricky here in this fight. I gotta lean with the wrestling. I've been a little bit back and forth. I was gonna possibly pick Yadong, but I'm sticking with my same pick that I gave to you when I broke down this fight on the last week's card, where this fight was initially supposed to take place. All right, guys, that's gonna wrap up UFC Simón versus Song. Not a lot of big names throughout this card, but I think that this fight card will play out to be an exciting one, if you ask me. And you guys know we are due to hit in a major way here, so I'm thinking it's going to be a good one, if you ask me. I really like our spots, and I'm feeling this card. I think that we profit, we bring some money in here, so hopefully you guys will ride with me here. Hopefully you guys are on to some solid spots yourself. Before we depart, I want to hit you guys up with some closing thoughts. Sometimes when I'm driving in the car, or whenever I got some time to think to myself, I'll try to think deep and try to give some of those messages out to you guys, because I like to do that for myself anyway. So if I'm on the mic here, you guys know I like to throw some of these thoughts your guys' your way. Let me know what you guys think about this. A lot of times people look back at the past and they wish they could be in those specific times, right? They think back to like their middle school days, the elementary days. They think about how great things used to be, and they kind of don't appreciate the time that they're living in. When you guys would probably agree that the time you're living in right now, in 5, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, you're going to be looking back at this exact time and just wishing you can go back to this exact time. You'll have that nostalgic feel or something back in the future, and you'll be thinking about this time right now. So remember that and appreciate that, because you're living in the time same way as you look back at specific times from 5, 10 years ago. You're living in them right now. So take a look around wherever you're living, even if it's in a small apartment and down the line you're looking to get a house. Sometimes you look back and you kind of miss that little apartment, man. You little things that you had in that apartment, that the little good times that it brought you, the little fun little things you had, not to go in detail, but like a little spot you had, your little smoke spot where you would sit around the corner, blaze up, nice little view you had on your screen patio looking at the woods or the shopping center, whatever you have going on. One step at a time. Appreciate the moment that you're in, because before you know it, it's all going to be gone. It's all going to be way past us, right? One day we won't be here anymore. So appreciate every step of the way. Appreciate all the things that you got in your life, man, because there's always people out there that have it way worse than you. So don't ever be down in the dumps. Appreciate what you got going on. Appreciate what you have, and appreciate the time that you have right now, the current time you have right now, because right now is a great time to appreciate and to take advantage of it. Do whatever you want to do, in the sense, you know, if you have things that you wanted to do or accomplish before you get old, work on them. And if you want to travel, try to make it happen. Just appreciate the time that you have, work on yourself. And even if it's just going to the local bar and just enjoying yourself for the weekend, whatever you have going on, if you're saving up money, appreciate all those steps in between, okay? Because they're all valuable. Appreciate your time with your family, specific family members that are getting up there in age, okay? Just think about it like that, all right? Because you're living in that time right now where you'll look back in 10 years and think about those nostalgic times, right? You'll think about the things that you used, right? Things, gaming systems, different types of things, shows you used to watch, and you'll think, oh, remember those days. You're living in it right now. So appreciate it. And I'll leave you guys with that. I hope you guys all have an amazing fight card as you guys watch this card. Hopefully you guys all make money, enjoy these fights. All right, guys? You guys know I appreciate you so much, all right? Thank you guys for all the support. You guys are much appreciated, all right? We'll sign out on that note. Signing out. Teller.
Welcome to the show. This the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.